Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about the mark of the beast. That's the 7th in our series, coming right up. So when we have the mark of the beast, people get terrified. It's an area of fear. It's not supposed to be fearful. I promise you this before I read this scripture. You, as a believer, as the bride of Christ, are not going to take the mark of the beast. Promise you. Not happening. Where do we get this little idea of the mark of the beast? Well, Revelation 13, and as I've told you before, we have the revelation is chronological, but then every once in a while it gets topical. And so it bounces around a little bit. Some people want to say it's a purely chronological book. Not exactly. Okay, because it gets onto topical issues. When in Revelation 11 we talk about the two witnesses coming up a little bit later, it's very, it spans the whole time frame. In Revelation 13 here, we're also spanning the same basic full time frame of end time issues all the way through. So it becomes a topical area, especially in this spot. Now, the mark of the beast is intimately tied to the antichrist and the false prophet. And we'll get into that a little bit, but it comes from Revelation 13:8. Here is wisdom. The one who has understanding must calculate the number of the beast, because it is a number of man. His number is 666. And I remember, I think I was in the 80s when I was listening to this band called DeGarmo Key. And DeGarmo Key had 666, and it was just this cool song. And I still can hear it in my head. I can actually hear the whole lines and the 80s kind of music kind of thing. But that's where most people look at this. I remember even in 2016, there was a wave of terror that everyone had to change their credit card machines because we had to utilize the little smart card parts. So, I mean, you had a little smart card readers. I had to change out to a different type of machine, and so did all the other retailers. And so we get to this place and, I have a smart card in my pocket. Well, guess what? I have a smartphone. I have a smart card. Don't you think they're tracking it? They are tracking it. Don't worry about that. Because Jesus is your protection. Jesus is your privacy filter. Thought about that. So let's get into our discussion today. And hope in the last days. I really love this first slide right up here with the mark of the beast, because the first idea that we had is to have a barcode, and we thought of this. Even early movies in the 80s were talking about this barcode that we were looking at that. No, it was the first foray of the world to quantify things. But it's not exactly what it will be like. So what is that? So on our second slide right here, it's ownership of humanity. Now, you go, what? It's not ownership of you, the bride. It's ownership of the rest of humanity. Do you know that the people that will take the mark of the beast, they will do so knowingly? They will get the image directly, this is my belief, directly from the false prophet through potentially an AI, artificial intelligence. And it says they worship the image of the beast. Man, guys, if you understood how amazing this prophecy is, worshiping an image of the beast, how could every person on this planet even in the 1300s, worship an image of a beast. It frankly makes no sense unless you fast forward into the 20th century. And frankly, you need to come into the 21st century to get a clue. Because in the 20th century, even the 1980s, we didn't understand that image part. Yeah, they could make a poster or something like that, but that wasn't even clear what it could be like. But it's about the ownership of humanity. See, Satan's been trying to do this for so long, guys. If you see what he's been about, he's always been about owning humanity. And because the ownership of humanity actually is in Jesus. But it's in the acceptance that the person has. They have a choice to accept Jesus all the way through and through. See, Jesus purchased all of humanity. He purchased sin inside of himself. When he was on the cross, John 19:30 through about 38, talks about Jesus and his death on the cross. The weight that he felt was incredible. It's something that none of us could have possibly done. Had every bit of my weight upon the world. And you got to see this from a historical or earthly perspective. So it says that in about 33 AD, Jesus dies on the cross, right? But it says from the foundation of the earth, the Lamb was slain, Revelation 13:8. We're in Revelation 13, weren't we? Scott was born in 66. In 78, he becomes a believer. And today we are in 2020. So does he accomplish or cover the sins of Scott all the way through this time frame? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. We've got to catch this. He's already covered my sins and even my future sins. What? He's already done it. He's actually paid for all of humanity. But you have to go down to the courthouse and purchase it. Let me just put it in another way. Let's say you and I were given a letter by the courthouse. The Tulsa County Courthouse, the Denver Courthouse, pick your courthouse, right? You get this letter says, you have a giant inheritance. You just got to come down and claim it. Now, the first time you get the letter, you get an email. And so it's an email letter, and you go, ugh. And then they send it to you physically. And you look at it, it's like, this is stupid. So I sit there and take the letter, rip it up and throw it away, and I just keep ripping it up. We all get these kinds of letters that we think are spam, right? And letters, physical letters and email letters. I keep putting in my spam filter. But you, bride, walk up and say, you know what? I'm going to check this out because I'm in some serious debt. Both of us are in debt. Okay? You go to the courthouse and they look you up and they say, oh yeah, you're right here. How much is it? It's more money than you can possibly imagine. What? It's for me? Are you Scott Young? Are you your name? Right? Yes, it's for you. Now, you go and claim this, and you're like, wait a second, I could have done that months and years ago. Right, you could have. Now, I come to my death, you come to your death, and you've accepted that. You paid off all your debts. I'm still living with my debt all the way through the end of my life. In that case, that's the same thing that happens right here, guys. If you can't see it, you're missing what Scripture's really telling you. But Satan wants to purchase you away. He's been doing it since the Garden of Eden. And he's going to do it in a giant way in the tribulation. So he's going to create a counterfeit purchase. See, the false prophet is going to create the mark. And I've talked to you a little bit about that. He is going to create the mark through the image. I truly believe he is going to give every single person. There's not going to be image centers or, necessarily. There are going to be places that you can go, but you know what? It's going to be an exact place, a spot, but you're going to get it from the false prophet. You go, how can we get that? Hey, by the way, today, I can talk to anyone through a smartphone. Holographic technology, I don't know what that is, and I don't really want to worry about that too much because it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to you. What's the role of the mark of the beast? Well, it's on your right hand or on your forehead. It's a permanent part of you. If you realized how amazing it will actually be, it'll be like, duh, why wouldn't I want that? If you knew nothing about the Bible. And we've already talked about, you're the bride of Christ. You know the Bible. You wouldn't take it. The chosen that we've talked about in that first half of the tribulation, they won't know stuff. It says in Luke 12:48, they didn't know. They did things deserving of blows and had some persecution or some blows. What? They didn't know. They didn't know anything about the word. That's the destiny of people around the world. They don't know anything about this. Now we're going to have we're going to have the two witnesses, and we're also going to have the 144,000. They're going to talk not just about this, but many other topics, so that they do know the right thing that happens. Excuse me. The role of the mark is the ownership part. And thirdly, it is an invasion of privacy. I mean, right now, we already have it. I see people all the time that think, I'm going to live off the grid. Man, if you have an email address, if you have a social security number, and come on, guys, you're on the grid. You need Jesus as your privacy filter. Okay? I mean, you're already on. They can record you. Don't worry about this stuff. That TV over there can be flipped on and record stuff. Just don't worry about it. Don't fuss about it. Okay, so what's the application of the mark of the beast? It's not going to be an old movie, snap it on your hand. It's going to have a GPS tracker. Now, you're seeing a little screen over here in the third one. And this is a really simple kind of thing, and they can put it in your hand, and your body temperature actually recovers the battery life of this thing. So we're going to have, crazy ability. It's available today. We put this in dogs. It's got terabytes of information potentially. Okay, right now it's more, hundreds of megabytes of information. But the point is, they'll have all your medical records on there. It's not a problem. It's easily accessible. See, a person who doesn't know about this stuff is going to look at it and say, man, that makes sense. We should just do it. I have a couple ideas about how that will work here, but we'll get into that here in just a second. Okay. Let's move that forward here. So, the purposes of that chip, it does say, and when you see what the antichrist and the false prophet are about, they're about bringing in one world religion and focusing on the mark of the beast, or the beast, the first beast, the antichrist. And the false prophet's whole job is to focus all the energies upon him. Okay? And we've talked about him a little bit before. So that's the religious worship. The second part is the financial worship. It says that no one can buy anything or sell anything without the mark of the beast. When you say buy and sell, now most people focus on the buying portion of that. They think, I'm not going to buy anything, so I need to prep. You can't prep enough. We'll talk about that one in upcoming weeks. You can't prep enough to do this. Don't believe it. We'll show you how you cannot possibly prep enough. But there's another part of it that you got to see, that you can't sell. It's essentially saying that businesses will completely shut down unless they operate in the mark of the beast. So there's no businesses that will not happen inside of that new monetary system. There'll be security access. I mean, we might not be able to get into houses or into cars or into other things without swiping that mark. We might not be able to get medical treatment without that mark. And it's going to be a fear-based point that people will do it. Not fear-based point that they're not doing it, fear-based point that they have to do it, or they're going to be left out. Now, when it says calculate the number of the beast, the Bible has all kinds of beautiful numerology, and don't get too much in the numerology, but just see what the numbers actually mean. The number 6 means a man's number with sorcery. It's actually real interesting when in this context. 3 is Bible prophecy in the fullness of time. Okay, well, think about that for a second. So 666 is first man's number, okay? And secondly, the 3 portion of that is the Bible prophecy about the fullness of time. So this is in that point. So Bible prophecy in that fullness. Wait, think about that for a second. Even the way that it's written, it's not necessarily 666 is on your, could it be part of the mark? Sure, it could be. I don't know. That's not the foci. The foci is what it means. It's the number of a man. It's the fullness of Bible prophecy. It's given at the right point in time. It could never happen in the 1940s. I had a guy that came to me, and I've mentioned it before, but mentioned many people like this. They believe in an amillennial viewpoint, or they really don't understand, tribulation issues, and they just kind of push it off. You have to answer, if you're an amillennialist, the Bible's saying this. In no portion of history have we limited people from only using this little thing for buying and selling. We haven't done it. And if we haven't done it, it hasn't happened. And if it hasn't happened, it's going to be a future issue. Now, why do we want to bring the mark of the beast? This is our 4th one. I'm going to share something with you. I think it's just as possible that there'll be an anti-hacking point. Okay, we have seen levels of hacking that happens. I've been hacked. I think a lot of people have been hacked and they don't realize it. Whether it's been on Facebook, or whether it's been through a LinkedIn account, or whether it's been on your credit card, or whatever that might be, you're going to have a hacking event that occurs. It's just the reality. But I have this sneaky suspicion that there is going to be such a massive hacking event. And it's going to be brought on by the same people that are trying to ask for the mark of the beast. Duh. Does that make sense? Why wouldn't the same people that are doing the hacking bring about this required change for you on the mark of the beast? What if they hacked me and I have, $200,000 of debt, just with the house, let's say. And suddenly my credit score goes from 750 down to 500 and I can't buy anything. Think about that for a second. If your credit score is around lower 500s, you can't purchase anything. You're not going to be able to purchase a car. You might not be able to get into an apartment. You won't be able to do anything. I could be foreclosed on in my house with this hacking event. I could lose all of those things. And we look at that and say, oh my gosh, what's happening? What could happen? Don't get in fear. We don't operate in a spirit of fear. You're gone. Don't worry about it. Promise. Watch the older videos. There's already going to be an economic chaos that is unprecedented, with as many as 700 million people leaving this planet. There's a huge number of people that are gone, and the businesses and jobs are completely destroyed. We think we have economic times at any point in our history, like the 1929 stock market exchange, just complete bottom out. In the late 80s, 90s, 2000, my stock crashed around 2001, 2000, and then, the 9/11, boom, knocked it down even further. Man, there is nothing like that thing that's coming down the road. When you have economic issues going on so dramatically that it's never happened in the history of the world, you're more likely than not going to have monetary change fluctuations. Okay, so when World War II was occurring, the Kaiser had an economic system to put on the war of World War I, so 14 to 19. Or 18. And so at the armistice agreement, so at 11/11/18, and it's 11 in the morning, kind of interesting, because even at 9 in the morning, they were still shooting off rockets, cannons at one another. And at 11 o'clock, it went silent. And the Germans weren't even allowed into Versailles, France, to do the armistice agreement. And we have a lot of issues with the Americans coming in and not being happy with the response, back and forth. And they put crushing numbers upon the Germans. Now, of course, the Germans did it, but they were devastated after the war. And that payment became so devastating, they couldn't do it. By the early or the middle 20s to late 20s, you could take in 1 billion Reichsmarks in a wheelbarrow and buy one loaf of bread. It completely devalued the Reichsmark. If you have that level of devaluing because people can't buy things and buy and sell because of this issue that's coming on, maybe an anti-hacking issue that they're trying to prevent the fraud, so a hacking issue that creates this whole need for an anti-hacking and all this other stuff. A fraud and all kinds of things that are happening. I think there's probably going to be a new monetary issue. Can it be a digital type of Bitcoin thing? I don't know. I think that's coming. I think it's very much in the works. Okay, so on the right side of the screen, you're going to see this next one here. We want to talk a little bit about the timeline. So we first have the pre-tribulation rapture and the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. At the beginning of the tribulation is the peace treaty. This is Daniel 9:27, that the false prophet signs with Israel or with a covenant for many, and he does it for 1 week, and in the middle of the week he messes it up. Now, Jesus introduces in Revelation 6, Jesus introduces the first seal. He cracks open the seal and introduces the very first white horseman, and that is the Antichrist. The second beast is the false prophet. This is in Revelation 13. Now that beginning first time frame, there is going to be severe deception. And I believe that it also comes along with that mark. Now, deception, what could that be? Fraud, just like we're talking about. When fraud happens to you, it messes your brain up. I mean, you sit there and think, what happened? I remember when someone stole my business credit cards. She had bought Colorado Rockies tickets. She'd also had a concert or something or other, or no, she was going to get some Colorado Rockies gear sent to her house. By a little investigation, I got a little information from one and a little information from the other. I had the name and the address in Denver. It was pretty interesting. And then I tracked it back to this company in Denver that was using my credit card just for normal, monthly purchases, like $69 a year, a month for membership to this group. I got through to the president of the company who was like, we're going after her. And I'm so sorry, we'll refund you, whatever. And I was like, no problem, I get you. I go to the Tulsa police and I finally go all the way. And guess what? Do you know who gets involved with that? This is real interesting. Do you know the Secret Service gets involved with it when it comes more than $500 across state lines? And the Secret Service guy calls me up, he goes, man, how did you get all this stuff? A weekend or so, a little bit of investigation. It's like, wow, that's really good. They got her on a second level felony charge against her. She'll never work in any field of accounting, and she didn't go to jail, but you see, that kind of event happens to people. It goes on all the time. And there will be severe deception and potentially that fraud like I'm talking about. There will be all kinds of things that will be happening. They'll be talking about the mark of the beast, and it's gonna seem like, duh, it's the most reasonable thing that you'd want to think about. You'd think, why wouldn't I want the mark of the beast? I mean, holy cow. Do I want to have fraud? Do I want to be kicked out of my house because someone's defrauded my house and taken all the value out of it? Someone's taken all my 401k and my savings account is just wiped clean? And the government's going, we'll replace all that stuff back for you if you just get on the mark of the beast. I mean, I'm not saying that's exactly what they're going to do, but it could be something like that. And it's going to be, yeah, and you got to worship me. Yeah, man, you're the one that took care of me. That's what they're going to say. It's going to make complete sense to us, or to them, those people at the time. Now, we understand that the mark of the beast will be permanent in the second phase of the tribulation. So, and some people think, well, it won't be available or won't be had in that first part. Well, I'll put it to you in a slightly different, process. Okay, so if we have that 7-year period of time, and in that first half of the tribulation, so this is 3.5 years, this is 3.5 years, okay? And we say that the mark of the beast, we'll put it this way, the mark is required here. Because there will be a group of people who will be martyred. Because they don't want to take the mark of the beast. So they will be martyred, and they will have a witness, a powerful witness. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. But because of the requirement of it. But that doesn't mean that the mark of the beast won't be happening here. Hey man, if I knocked out I had a fraud event that took away all the values in your life, your house, your car with payments, your cell phone. I mean, pick the different thing. And you can't, and it starts messing you up so that your credit rating is just off the chart. I mean, just null and void, excuse me, that you can't even buy anything. It's not just talking about buying. It's like, man, if I'm so screwed up because of this issue, I very likely might say, you know what? That mark looks like a pretty decent thing. So even if it isn't required, and it's required here, and it's not required here, don't you think that the responses of the world are going to happen around it? Now, what happens in that second half of the tribulation is that we don't just have the mark of the beast that's required, but there is a worship component of that. Now, I've sort of mentioned this to you before, but I've mentioned to you that there's a friend of mine who created this unique type of thing, and he's not just the only one that's working on this, that through little patches that they can put on your skin or different places, that they can transmit information that goes into your hearing through the skin layer. We're not talking about what audiologists call bone conduction, where sound is, you can feel it vibrating in your body. They can go right through that. You see, in Muslim countries, there's this call to prayer. I can even imagine 5 times a day they're saying, bow down and worship the antichrist. And you know what? After a bit, you're going to go, he's the one that solved my financial woes. Dude, I'm ready for that. That's what people are going to feel like. Satan, and the reason why this happens here, Satan, the Antichrist does die and has a temple, has a resurrection type of experience with that, but Satan has to come in to this. Now, we hear this in Revelation. It says, woe, the devil has come down to you with great wrath, knowing that his time is short. And that's when he is kicked out of heaven and he comes into the Antichrist. And if he's going to be on the earth, he's going, my time's short, you're going to worship me, and you're coming with me. I'm taking as many people with you. You see, so the mark and the worship is a part of this. But what does it get those people in that time frame? So here's one of the things that you have to understand is that in that final moments, and it can happen whenever you do get it, there are several negative benefits of the mark of the beast. Now, if you've listened to the fun series of the Left Behind series, they have, and I mentioned this one maybe to you before, but there's this one, I think his name is Chan, if I got it right here, and he gets the mark of the beast so he can work for the Antichrist, and he also has the mark of the believers in it, and then they pray him off of the mark of the beast. I just think this is kind of a ridiculous thing. It was a cute fictional tactic, but it's not biblical. The reality is, this is a permanent once and for all decision. If you believe that God wants to hijack you into doing something that you're not really ready for, you're just missing what God's talking about. He absolutely, 100% will clearly tell the people on this earth, this is what it means. Don't believe that the 144,000 are not going to understand it and transmit that to the chosen. Don't believe that the two witnesses and the angel, we'll talk about those in a little bit, won't be shouting at the rooftops and talking about this. That's one of the reasons why the Antichrist wants to kill the false prophets, because they're blowing up his message. And he keeps trying to do it, but he doesn't get to do it until the very end. It's kind of interesting. But I want you to see this. Okay. As we've talked about this a little bit before, we have our spirit, our soul, and our body. Now, we're not going to talk about the believer for just a minute. We're just going to talk about the non-believer, okay? So we're going to say Jim over here is our non-believer, and he lets his spirit go into death. He doesn't accept anything about that. So his soul can't be judged until he bodily dies. So his soul only goes into death when the body dies. So when he comes to his death experience, his soul goes right toward the spirit. And we talked about this a little bit. Now, that's when he has a permanence of his life or his existence in hell that moves down a little further when he comes to the white throne judgment. He's going to move himself into the prison or in the lake of fire. Okay? So he goes from death into hell, and hell for as long as he's there until the lake of fire. Now, most people will be at least 1,000 years and maybe longer, obviously. Someone died in 30 AD, they're going to be in there for 3,000 or 4,000, 3,000 years or something like that. They're going to experience that exactly in that way. It's going to be torture. I'm sorry, but you make a choice. This life is important. But here's what Satan does. He jumps the gun a little bit. So what he does to you is says, if you come up and get the mark of the beast, I'm going to fix things on this planet. But what I'm going to do further is I'm going to hijack this process. Instead of the bodily death that puts you in that place of potential for, this has put you in the place of hell. He even hijacks the point of death and says, you're mine even when you're alive. And it really makes a lot of sense, because here's what happens. It is the seal of Satan. It's the ID of Satan. It's like when you say, you go to the police and you say, here's my ID kind of thing, and you look at that and they, oh, okay, you're from Oklahoma or whatever that is, right? Or you have your passport is your ID. That's your ID. This mark of the beast is the ID for you and Satan. And I talk about this thing called the fifth trumpet. Guys, I want to share with you the fifth trumpet because it's one of the most curious and absolutely fascinating areas. So we're going to flip over to Revelation 9:15. Got to flip back a few verses there. We're coming. Oops. Went a little too far. Okay. Fifth trumpet the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that fallen from heaven to earth. The key of the shaft of the abyss was given to him. The shaft was open of the abyss. Smoke came up out of that shaft like smoke from a great furnace, so that the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the shaft. Then the locust came out of the smoke onto the earth. The power was given to them, the power of the scorpion. Now, it explains who they are, but what they basically says in verse 4 is this: they can't do any grass. They can't kill off any grass, anything, but only people who don't have the seal of God. So that doesn't just mean the people of the mark of the beast. It means everyone who hasn't accepted Christ yet. They're not permitted to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment is like the torment of a scorpion. Verse 6, really powerful verse. In those days, they will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. And it goes into a little farther here. It talks about the stinger, but they will harm people for 5 months. I want you to pause for a second. And I want to talk a little bit about this issue of suicide. When we come up to this ugly issue of suicide, and lots of people have committed suicide and many more have contemplated suicide. And unfortunately, it's just a sad part of the reality of life. And I don't want to get into the morality of it. I just want to talk a little bit about what this means. This is suicide that is a really powerful level. Okay. So in this thing called the fifth trumpet, people will long to die, but can't. Now, those who believe that the tribulation, or we're in the fifth trumpet, or any of these other things, or in the sixth seal, or any one of those issues, have to answer, when in the history of the world did people long to die but weren't able to do it? The answer is no. You don't have a time. You can't come up with the time that the planet of people, that these locusts come out of the ground and do all this crazy stuff. I mean, he doesn't give, this isn't just a symbol. We think about it as a symbolic. Man, it's deeper than symbolic points. Read the scripture again. Let it read what it says about itself. But it says that people will long to die, but they can't die. This is the subject of several of my books. One is called Our Secret Zombie Life. It's where I first dealt with that book. What is even crazier about this, and why I'm going to talk a little bit about what I just listed to you, is verse 11. Verse 11, they had as their king the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon. His name, and in Greek, he has the name Apollyon. Okay. Abaddon and Apollyon. This has bothered me for literally 33 years until about 2014. And I remember very clearly God telling me to go to this movie. And it was World War Z. I'm like, what? I don't want to go see World War Z. It's a zombie movie. I'd heard about it. I'm like, it's Brad Pitt and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I hate horror movies, but God told me to go. I even kind of said this, I said this on Facebook one time. I finally, after arguing with God for 2 weeks, I finally went and saw it, and I'm like, oh, I can't watch some of this stuff. And, so I go afterward, and I'm like, God told me to go see this movie, World War Z. I don't know why. I'm really praying about that one. And for 6 months, I kind of travailed about it. And I sat with a friend of mine, and he finally said, this is part of the answer. And then I had to research the heck out of it. But I want to share with you this zombie point because it'll make so much sense. The word zombie comes in to our understanding as the word zombie, Z-O-M-B-I. It comes from a guy named Robert Southey. He's an English man who wrote the Three Little Pigs. And so he actually is in Haiti, and he has an interaction with these chiefs. There's these chiefs who have this tetracycline, and they take this drug, and it's just this white powder. If they get too much, it'll kill the person. If they get too little, it won't do anything. And they would blow it on the person. And the person, after a little bit, would get into a catatonic state. Now, this is in the 1800s, so they didn't have medical data to find out this person's really alive. It just looks like they're dead. They would, and because they don't bury people underground, because it's in Haiti in a high water table, they would put them in mausoleums. And after about 2 days or something like that, this chief would walk in and wake that person up and say, I got your soul, you're coming for me, and you'd work for me. And he was called the zombie. Now, there's a movie in the 80s called Serpent in the Rainbow that actually explored that type of drug and explored this idea of the zombie priest. This person who had that ability to mix that tetracycline would take, and he was called a chief. You're going, so what? Let's get a definition of the word Abaddon. Abaddon in the Greek is called a destroying angel, a destruction, the prince of the internal regions. And Apollyon is also the destroyer. But also, it says their king is the angel of the abyss. Now, wait a second. Why are all these guys rushing around saying in Greek and Hebrew? It's the part that makes no sense until what you realize what they're saying is king or their chief destroyer. If Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy, the operative part is the killing part. And wait a second, it backs this information up with a people who long to die, but they can't die. Guys, this will freak you out. But this is the understanding of the zombies. Man, when you look at the genre of the zombie subculture, watch any movie, it is the most lame process. Sorry, but it's very lame. I mean, there are people that, Walking Dead and all this kind of stuff. The genre has no life in it. It's death in it, obviously, but there's not even really good writing in there. It's just a desperation and everyone's pretty much dying around you. I mean, there's not, even in romantic comedies, there's uniqueness that can happen. Any other kind of genre has some uniqueness, whether in Westerns a little bit, straightforward in how it actually happens, but there can be uniqueness even in those. But the zombie subgenre, it happens almost the same way in every single movie. And so you have to ask yourself, why is there such a draw to it? It's because many people feel the deadness inside and identify with the deadness. And when you come up to the fifth trumpet, in which you long to die, but you can't because you don't have the seal of God on your forehead, what do you think is going to happen? people are going to try to die. Hey, when you have someone who longs to die, and we're not talking about just a few someones, we're not talking about a little crazy stuff, we're talking about huge numbers of people, millions. I promise you this time frame will be about millions of mass murderers who really can't murder. And these angels keep running around calling out king or destroyer. But what I think that they're actually going to say is zombie. And it's inside of my books. This is, I'm giving you a shortened version of this. But this is the fifth trumpet. There's nothing ever been like that in the history of the world. And yet, it's coming on the planet. By the way, that only happens in the last about 1.5 years before the end of this thing. And God's going to say to you, you want the zombie subculture? You want that? Well, I'm going to put hell on earth. Right after that's the sixth trumpet, in which as many as 1.5 billion people will die. 2/3 of the planet. I mean, guys, there is so much death and destruction that Matthew 24 says, if the days aren't shortened, all flesh would perish. There's no one left alive. This is a unique teaching that I know of no one talking about. This is one of the most powerful areas that it's right inside of the Word. And when you put it all together, it's scary. And the people who don't have the mark, the seal of God on their forehead, who rather have the mark of the beast and hijacking themselves, they're going to be living in this kind of reality. And it's every person who has the mark, who will get the mark of the beast, will feel this way. They might actually kill themselves. Now, what do you say? Well, they're going to die. They're going to walk around with wounds on their head. Do you see that little one right there? This is from a zombie crawl, and it happens in every city. Now, they're trying to reduce these because it's really a lawless time. It happens in Halloween. And for instance, Denver has this one. It's a zombie crawl, and it's on 16th Street Mall. It's a pretty disgusting kind of thing. And people will dress up. And if they want to die, but they're not able to die, they're going to kill themselves. They're going to have to come up with newer and newer ways of doing this. It's one of the subjects of my new book. It's just coming out here real soon. We'll have that up on my website. It's drscottyoung.com. But guys, this is some scary stuff that's coming. And by the way, you're already gone. You're the bride. You're already gone. Don't worry about it. Focus on Jesus, because he's made the difference for you. So we've done the 7th in our series, the 8th one coming up. Oh man, this 8th one is really a fun one too. The 8th one in our series talks a little bit about the two witnesses, the last portion of the tribulation, and we've mentioned a little bit here, and then also the angel of God. Thank you so much. Subscribe to us, ask questions. We're going to have a lot more information about it, and there are also classes that are happening in the Tulsa area, so contact us. Thanks so much.